from. Welcome to our session 14, that is budget planning in D365 F&O. We have our presenter Saurabh Bharti. Congratulations, Saurabh, on getting the MVP, and we are very happy to see you getting the MVP, and very happy to host you after that. I think this is the first session you are doing it after the MVP with our community, I believe, right?
That's right, Venkat. Thank you
We
so
are
much for
super
this.
excited.
Cool.
Over to you, Saurabh.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session, and thank you for taking out your, time from your busy schedule. So today's session is focused on the budget planning. So we're going to talk about this particular topic, and let's explore what we have got within this particular feature within the budgeting module. Quick intro about me. I am Saurabh Bharti. I am based out in UK, London right now. I am MVP for the Business Application MCT and Microsoft Certified Professionals with over 10 years of experience. I do share my experience knowledge through my blogs and the YouTube channels. And you can also connect me on LinkedIn. If you have got any questions or anything, I'm happy to help you there. So without further delay, so this is our agenda for today. We will be talking about what is budgeting in D365. Then we will talk about the budget planning. What exactly is this? Then we'll talk about some key configurations which we need to be aware about for doing this budget planning. And then we will have a quick demo or the configuration reviews within the application. And then we will have the Q&A. Uh, these are the links which you have for your Microsoft Learns. So anything which I will be presenting, I have taken those things from the Microsoft Learn or the docs which we have official portal. Uh, quick note about this session. So budget planning is a very wider area in D365, and it is also not touched upon lot by a lot of people also, right? And also Microsoft has a documentation, but that's very limited as well. So we will try to focus on the understanding the key configurations and the basics which we need to know for using this budget planning in D365. So our focus will be around that. It is very hard to complete this in an hour. What we'll try to run through the end to end from configuration to the getting the output in the D365, but it might be possible that it might be a bit high level in the second half of the session. Okay, so first thing about the budgeting in Dynamics 365. So what is budgeting? So budgeting is divided into three key components in Microsoft Dynamics 365, and one is the basic budgeting and the budget control and the budget planning. Now, it depends on the individual organization or for us that which component we would like to use from these capabilities which we have in Dynamics 365. So you might see a lot of time people are just using the basic budgeting. Basic budgeting is that you have the budget defined out of D365 in your external system or possibly on an Excel spreadsheet or somewhere else. And then you import that in D365 just for the reporting purpose, because in D365 you have your actuals posted through the financial modules, right? So you might just need that the final budget which you have defined for the reporting purpose. Second one is the budget control. Some people or some customers put the additional control on that okay, we have the budget. Now you are posting the actuals based on the actuals transactions in the system, but we want to bring some control that so that you do not exceed the budget which we have defined in the system or which we have imported in the system, right? So then you can start using the budget control. And to be very, I mean, frank with you, like, I mean, most of the customers you would see, like, if they are using the budgeting module, they will be using the basic budgeting plus the budgeting control. But then you have got a third component, which is the budget planning. Okay. Now just imagine the first step, which I was just now talking about, that you have got the basic budgeting. Now that basic budgeting is the output. Once you have the final budget, you put into the system. But if you have to prepare that budget, if you have to derive that budget based on some rules and the collaboration with your internal organization or different departments, then how do you plan that? And that is what the budget planning helps us in doing this particular activity. So these are the different components, and depending what you want to use, you can use it. So you can possibly you can independently use the basic budgeting with the budget control, but not using budget planning, or you can use the all three things. Uh, I know this might not be a very clear diagram for you, but if you talk about the budget planning, don't worry about this. I'll try to explain in a simple way. So if you talk about the budget planning, so budget planning is to derive the budget for a specific budget period. Now, your organization might be doing the budgeting for a period, like which is possibly a monthly budget planning. You might be doing the budget planning for a quarter or half yearly or yearly. Now, when we are doing this budget planning, when we are defining the budget, right? How do you do that, right? Now, there are different methods available for that. Not in D365. Normally, the organizations follows the different methods which are available. Now, some people might be utilizing the historical data to plan it out. So, for example, I have the previous year budget and the actuals available with me. Now, I want to use that to define this year budget by putting, let's say, increment of 5% or 10% on top of it and define that as my budget. That's one of the option which can people can have. Or you can follow a top down approach or bottom up approach in the organization. So for example, you are doing the budget planning at an organization, a legal entity level, but you also have the departments under that legal entity. So now you can have a single budget which has been defined, right? And then you distribute to your sub department that, okay, for salary, I have this budget, or IT expenditure, I have this particular budget. And now this will be divided into these different departments on on some calculation basis. Or the other way, that's the top down. Then bottom up can be like you ask your departments at a lower level that give us your number, that what budget you need this in this particular period. Possibly it's a quarter or month or half yearly or year, right? Give us your individual number, and then you aggregate those numbers and then define your final budget for the legal entity. So that is your budget planning, and that really depends on the method which you want to follow for the budget planning, right? Now, this diagram which you see on your screen, it just to explain you that different key components or the terms which we have, like we have something called as budget cycle, which defines your the period for which you are doing the budget planning, the budget register entry, the budget process, the configuration, the organization hierarchy. How do I know that my organization have 5 departments for whom we need to do this budget planning, right? So all these things are defined in this particular diagram, but we will be talking about these individual components which we have very specific to uh, the budget planning configuration in D365. To simplify that whole process, I can put that like how this works in D365. Okay, so in D365, Now, if you remember the first three capability which we just now spoken, for your budgeting to work or for bringing the control for your budget, what you need is in the end is the budget register entry. Now, budget register entry is nothing but is your budget for that specific period which you are considering, right? That's your budget register entry. Now, how you create these budget register entries, how you define this budget is the key thing in the planning. Now, how the planning helps you to do this? The first step which you need to do is the budget planning configuration. So first is you need to define the configurations. And trust me, it is a bit complex. Can you mute yourself? I'm not sure who was it. It will be good. So the first thing is that budget planning configuration which you need to do. Now it is a bit complicated configuration in D365, but if you understand the flow of this configuration, it will make more sense for you when you do by yourself, right? So under the budget planning configuration, the key things which you need to define or need to configure are your organization hierarchy and some of the parameters for the budget planning. Then you need to define scenarios, stages, the workflows, the allocation schedule, stage allocation, priorities, the columns, and the layouts, right? So all these things are going to be defined or configured. Okay. Now, all these things, what all these things are, how it can be configured, I'm going to talk about this with one example. Once you have the configuration done, then you have the planning process to be defined. So once you have these things configured, then it goes as an input to your planning process, that how your planning process works for any legal entity or for any budget cycle. And that is where you define for which budget cycle you are defining this process, for which ledger means the which legal entity you are doing, which accounting structure or hierarchy, and these planning stage and the rules you will be using. Once you are done with that, then you are ready to create your something called as budget plans. Now, budget plans are your preview about what you are going to budget for a specific period. That is your budget plan. Now, your budget plan in Dynamics can be created in multiple ways. So you can create the budget plan from your general ledger data, which means your ledger posting. As I said, if you are doing historical budgeting, so you can have your previous year transactions or the actuals. Based on that, you can create your this year budget plan. You can have the budget plan generated from the budget plan itself. So maybe if you had last year budget planning or current year, if you have already a budget plan, you can create from there. You can have the budget plans from sub ledgers like a fixed asset project, and then you can have from the demand forecast or the forecast position if you have in the system, or the supply forecast if you have in the system. So your budget plans can be created from different sources, and it really depends how you want to define your budget plans, what data sets or the numbers which you want to consider in the system for defining these budget plans. So then you create the budget plan. And once you have those budget plans, you can modify them, you can get the approval and get them finalized. And once that is done, then you create your final budget out of that, and that gets converted into your budget register entry. And then you can apply a budget control configuration on top of that to use it fully. So if you, in an ideal scenario, if you are using the budgeting module uh, in a full functioning way, this is how you will use it for your customers. Okay, so that's how it works in the system. Before I move to the examples which I have prepared for you, maybe it is worth understanding these key configurations or the key terms basically. We would say like, so budget planning process. So what is budget planning process? So it determines how budget plans can be updated, routed, reviewed, and approved in the organization hierarchy. So for example, we just spoke, if we have a budget where we are defining at the organization level, then if it has to be flow down to the department's head, and then it has to be again aggregated after they modify, update, or change anything in that. So how that process should flow is defined into your budget planning process. And what is budget plans? So budget plans contains your budget data for that particular budget cycle, as I said. So if you are doing the quarterly budget or half yearly or yearly budget planning, so that will be your different budget plans you can create in this system. Now these budget plans can also be specific to any, let's say you can have a budget plan specific to your IT department if you are doing only at a department level or the organization level. Then you have planning scenarios. So planning scenarios are basically on what basis you are doing your, or the category of the data which you want to consider for your budget plans is defined using the budget plan scenario. We will talk about this in using one example. And then you have planning stages, that how this is going to be flowed. So let's say if someone in the accounts department create, the finance manager creates the initial budget, then it goes to the department managers, then it comes and aggregates and it gets reviewed by the CFO or the controller, and then final budget is being created. And now to do all these things, you need the approvals and things. So then you have to also define the budget planning workflows, and budget planning workflows are a bit different than the usual workflows. We have some additional workflow items or things to be used here. So we'll talk about that. What are the different options you have when you define the budget planning workflow? So these are some key terms or the configuration you need to understand by the definition that we need to configure in budget planning. Now, once you have the configuration, what are the things which you can do using this particular budget planning module? So you can create your budget plans, right, for your revenue and expense. You can analyze and update your budget plans for different scenarios if you have. So sometimes when you are creating your budget or you are planning your budget, you might have different scenarios that you want to do based on, let's say, a previous historical budget, or you want to do based on the actuals which were posted last year, or you want to add a 5% on top of it, and then you want to analyze that, okay, what is my budget looking like? So you can have a different analysis for your different budget plans which you generate. Then you can route the budget plans automatically using the workflows, and then you also consolidate multiple budget plans at from a lower level to the organization. That's what I explained, that you can have bottom up the budget planning which you can do, or top to bottom budget planning which you can do it, right? So these are the different key tasks which you have it. So now we understood the different concepts or the how what capabilities are available. Now let's take the example and then see that how it looks. So what I've done is that I've just prepared a simple Excel spreadsheet with these key configurations which we have and with one example, so that it helps you to look at the system when we go to the system and see that, okay, where it is defined, why it is defined, right? So now the example can be, just look at this section first. So let's say I want to define I want to define the budget for this particular year. Now I can define for any budget cycle. As I said, you can have the budget for the quarter, half yearly or yearly basis, anything. But I want to define the budget for this year. Let's take an example. And when I want to define this, I want to consider the last year actual data. I want to consider the last year budgeted data when I'm doing my planning. And then once that is done, then what I can do that I can create my budget for this year considering those two different data sets which I have. So this will give me one number, right? So now I can add on top of it a 5% increase or something. So I can do that. Once that is done, I want to send this, and I'm doing at the department level. Let's assume that then what I will do, I will send this, I will distribute this budget to my different departments. So for example, let's say in the last year, my total budget was the 10,000, and let's say my total expenditure was 12,000, right? So I had this number. But when I considered this for this year, let's say my final budget is 15,000, which I have decided. So this is my at a top level, which I have defined. Now, after this, what I did is that I sent to my department and I said for IT, I will have 7,000. And for sales, let's say I will have 5,000 as my budget, right? And for the HR, I will have, let's say, 3,000 as a budget, right? So this is what I have sent to my departments. Now, when I send to my department, they can also give their inputs or they can revise this. So once they give their input and they revise this, right? Now you might have a budget which they say like for the IT, I want to have 10,000. For the sales, I want to have 7,000. And then let's say for the HR, I want to have 6,000, right? So that's their budget. Now, next thing what I need to do is that I need to consolidate this. And when I consolidate it, I can just sum this out and then my total budget comes to, let's say, 23,000, right? And then this aggregated budget need to be approved by finance or the CFO or anyone who is authorized. And then I take this budget and define my new year budget. And that is going to create my budget register entry for each of the department with this, right? So that is kind of a like you can think of that. That's how you will do the budget planning in for any customer for any budget cycle which you define it here, right? So that's one example which we are taking. Now let's understand that to achieve this, if I have to do this kind of a budget planning, what are the different configurations I need to do and how those configuration will look like. And then we will go to the system and we'll try to see that how this is configured, right? Now, when we go to the configuration part, first thing is your organization hierarchy, which you need to define in the system. So organization hierarchy will be your legal entity, and then you will have these three different departments created. Now, when you are defining the org hierarchy, as you know, whenever we define any org hierarchy in the system, we need to associate the purpose of that hierarchy. So we can define the budgeting as a purpose for that particular hierarchy. Now, once that is done, the first thing is that we need to define the different scenarios which are possible based on this data. So if you see, you have the different numbers available at different stages, right? These are your different scenarios in this case. Okay, so in this case, what are our scenarios? So maybe scenario number one will be last year actuals, which is this. Scenario number two is last year budget, which is this. The scenario number three is your final, let's say this year you have created or aggregated or approved budget, right? Then scenario number four is your, let's say the budget which is being requested by the departments. And then you have the scenario number five, which is your aggregated budget. And then you have the final budget based on this aggregation which you have done. So the different data sets which you are going to use for your budget planning is typically is your scenario, right? So you have, let's say scenario S1 to S6 here. Okay. Now, once these scenarios are there, what these scenarios are doing, these are moving from one step to another. So you can say these are the different stages. So then you need to define the different stages. So how your stages looks like, you have the initial budget first. Your initial budget is, let's say this 15,000. Then what it does, it distribute this budget. So then distribution becomes your another stage of the budget planning. Once it is distributed, what it is happening, these departments are reviewing this budget, right? So then your department review becomes the another stage for that. And once that is done, they modify and they give the approved budget. Then you have the another stage here, which is your department approved. Then you have, once you have this department approved budget, you need to aggregate this, consolidate this, which is your this one. So then you have the aggregated, right? And then it is being reviewed by CFO or someone. Then you have that next stage. And once that is done, then you have the final approval available. So then you also need to define the different stages. So in this example, let's say we have the 7 stages available for this particular budget planning which we have. Now here, when you define these stages, it is worth noting that some stages are at a high level, the top level where we are talking about, and the some stages are at a department level, right? So we need to categorize and we need to understand this category of the different stages as well. Okay, so first thing is we have the scenario which is nothing but is your kind of numbers and the data sets which you are using for your budget planning. The stages are then how your numbers and those data sets are kind of moving from one step to another step with the type, whether it's a total aggregated or it's a distributed at a department or the organization hierarchy level. Here we are talking about the department, but not necessary that you always use the department. If you are using the business unit, it can be the business unit for you. Okay, so anything is possible for you in terms of the org hierarchy which you define here. So once you define your stages and then you define your scenario and these stages, the next thing is that now I am creating this, taking this last year data, then aggregating, then sending it to department. Someone must be approving from there. Someone must be approving here. So how do I define my workflows, right? So we need to create the workflows for these with different business stages, the planning stages which we are creating here. Okay. Now, what are the different workflows? So why I spoke about that you have two types of stages, the total and the department, because your workflow creation for the budget planning will be depending on this part. So you will have a workflow defined for approving this total budget, which is at an aggregated level. And then you will have a different workflow for the department. And that is where you need to have the two workflows. So we will be talking about these two workflows. I have used the demo data here. So I will show you those two workflows which we already have. So one workflow is, let's say 152, we will say that it is a total budget, and 153 workflow which we have is the department level work, but which we have it. Now, how these workflows are defined? Now, for the total, what is happening? First, we activate, which is nothing but my this budget, right? And then we have the planning allocation, and then we transition the stage and we send it to the review distribution, and then we again do the planning and then the transition to the finance approval, and then we end it, right? But for the department, what it is happening, you have the, let's say once you have it aggregated here, from here it gets stage transition happens, it comes to your department review, and then it gets reviewed, and then you again transition to your total budget workflow which you have it. So basically the workflow's importance here is to move those different stages from one place to another place and taking the right approval or the reviews here. Okay, now before I move to the next thing, what I will do is that I will just show you the example of the workflow which we have in Dynamics. And I have taken this 152, the workflow which we have out of the box. So, I mean, if you want to navigate to your workflows, so how you navigate, I will just refresh my Dynamics screen. So your budget planning and everything is available under the budget modules, which you have it here. And then if you go to setups, you have the different sections which we are talking about. Then you have the budget planning here, and then you have the budgeting workflows. So there are multiple workflows which you can create, but we are talking about these two workflows, taking the example of the top level, which is total budget, let's say. approval, and then this is about the department which is there. How you choose them, you click on the new and then you select the type of workflow which you want to have it, and then you create it. Now once you create this, this is how it is working. Now if you observe one thing on this workflow canvas, that typically in your different the workflows which you define for purchase requisition or purchase order or the journals and other stuff, you might have the different types of task and the activities or the workflow elements which are available. But for the budget planning, you have the different automated task available. So activate associated budget plan is basically to activating that budget plan which from where you are starting. So just remember the total budget when the example which we have in our Excel sheet is what is my actual budget plan. So this is my 15,000 is my budget which I have initially defined based on, let's say, historical data. Now I need to activate this before it goes to the next stage, right? So that is what is your, I mean, you can use that as an activate budget plan, right? So that's your automated task. Then the next thing which is you can define is your budget planning stage allocation, that how you want to allocate this particular budget which you have activated. So if I have activated the initial budget, how I want to activate or how I want to allocate to a specific stage is defined using this particular automated task. Once that is done, then you have to transition to the different stage. So let's say if I have a approved stage, so if I go back to our example, so let's say my stage is, let's say this is my stage ST03, which is my initial budget, but now I want to transition and send it to my let's say, or let's say this is my stage and I want to send it to the approved stage, which is my approved budget. Now how do I send that? How do I to a different stage is using this particular automated task. Most of the workflows which you will create for the budget planning, you will need to use these automated tasks before it gets approved, right? And then once it is transitioned, then you have a stage. Once it is transitioned to a specific stage, then you have to get it reviewed. So if it can be reviewed by finance manager, controller, CFO, department manager, or anyone, you have it, right? So you get that review step. Once it is reviewed, then again you need to have the allocation of the next stage, and then you have to transition to the next stage. Then again you will have an approval defined there, who is going to be approving that, and then you transition to the next stage. So possibly this first is your the you getting the review from your initial budget, and this is your final budget which is after getting uh, from your departments what they have approved, right? And then you get it finally transformed to a last stage which can be your final this year budget which we have defined in our stage, right? So this is how you can define your budget workflows, and it plays a very important role in this whole planning, budget planning configurations. And it is very important that we understand this. Now, similar to this, you also have to define another one for the department budget, because we have the two level of approvals. If you looked at this, so this is my distributed data department budget. So I need to define this, right? So then you define the workflows and then you associate which workflow will be used for which particular stage, right? So you might be wondering that how do I know which stage to transition, from where to transition, how system will know? So when you define this thing, now there is a configuration where I will be walking you through with the exact same configuration in the system. So you associate your workflows with these different stages which you have created. So the system will know for which state, which workflow I need to use it. Then you have the constraint, the scenario constraint. So you have the scenario, you have the workflows and the stages now. Now when things are moving, now I created a approved budget, send it to the department for the review. Can they edit? Can they modify that? Or it is just for a view purpose? So all these things, whether they can view or edit, or you can only view all these things you define under the scenario constraint configurations. Now, once that is done, then you define your allocation schedule. Now, what is allocation schedule? If you remember in this, there are three different allocation which you might be doing. So first one is that you are distributing this, then you are aggregating this. Once you get this aggregated budget, that's for the one budget for the year. Now, if you want to allocate this to, let's say, 12 months period, then you can do the allocation. So how your allocation is going to happen once you have your final number is your allocation schedule. So what will happen? First, I will distribute. How I will distribute? S3 to S4. What is S3? S3 is my this one. So what I do is, like, once I have this year approved budget, what I do, I just transition to the department level distribution, isn't it? So 15,000 I am just distributing. That is my S3 and this is my S4. So this is the first level of the distribution. Then what I'm doing, I'm aggregating. What is my aggregation? Once I have the approved budget from my departments, I am just creating the aggregation. So once I have this, I'm doing the aggregation here. So that is what is my S4 to S5. So S4 is this and S5 is my aggregated budget. And then what I'm doing, I have the final budget available for me. I'm just creating the allocation. So that final budget is my final approved budget, which I am allocating across, let's say, number of 12 months or 6 months or quarter or whatever it is. I'm just allocating. So how my allocation is happening based on the numbers which I get after these workflows and everything is being triggered. Then the stage allocation. How do you define your different stage allocation to different workflows? So total budget workflow has the S1 distributed, right? The total workflow has the S5, which is the aggregated, and this total workflow has the S6 allocation period. So your each stage which you have created, each allocation schedule which you have created gets associated with the workflow. So just imagine this as a ledger configuration which you do in journal ledger. So in journal ledger, you define your accounting structure, financial dimensions, currency, calendar, and everything. But then finally you associate everything at a one place so that you know for which legal entity, what ledger calendar, what accounting structure and things which you need to use it, right? So this is your final mapping of everything which you have in the system, right? So now we have seen this on an Excel spreadsheet, and maybe it helps you to understand this. It's a complex process. Maybe if you do it by yourself a couple of times, you will be able to get hold of these things. But let me navigate now directly to the system and show you these things which I have just now explained in the Excel spreadsheet. Now, if you go to budgeting module under the setup budgeting, then you have the budget planning configurations available here. Now, this is where all the things which I have just now explained, you need to map it. So first is your parameter, how you want to define which financial dimension set and who should be using. You can define based on the worker position or the security of the organization. You can just define it. But let's start from this scenario thing. So what I have done is that I have used the existing demo data, which we have it, and I've just tried to number it like what I was explaining you just now in an Excel spreadsheet. So if you see it here, you have the previous year actuals, previous year budgeted, baseline for this year, let's say initial budgeting, then department request, department approved, and then you have the final forecasted, right? So this is how you define it. But the important thing to note here is that on what basis you are doing, right? So monetary is like basically you are doing the numbers which are posted in your ledger or in your budget. That's what is the monetary which you are using here. But then you also have different options. So if you want to do your budget planning based on the number of head counts, or possibly you want to do the rent budgeting, rent expense budgeting based on the floor size, square meter, square, and all those things. So, but for that, you need to import the data. You need to have that data to define it, right? Then you define your stages here. Now stages are also, again, I've just put the initial stage, then you distribute, departments reviewed, then it is submitted, aggregated, reviewed by CFO, and you have the final budget, right? I hope now it makes very clear that how these stages are set up for your entire planning. Now here comes the mapping, where once you have the scenario and the stages mapped, then you have the different workflow stages. Now you can define different, but we will understand only from the OPEX top level and OPEX department level, these two. And these two are nothing but which I was just talking about. OPEX total level is your total budget, and OPEX department level is your department budget. So that's what we are talking here. So if you see, this is top level 152 I have, and I have selected the stages. Now, if you remember, what are the stages? Planning stages are at a total budget. So these are the four stages which are applicable for this total workflow. And these are the four which we have also specified. Now, these three stages will go into the department workflow. So if I go here, the next level, department level, these are the three stages I have mapped it for this particular workflow. Okay. So now this is how you map your stages with the workflow. Then comes to the allocation schedule, where can you please mute yourself? Okay. So then it comes to the different stages which you can define. So stages all sorry, the planning allocation schedule, like from where which stage to which stage it will move, right? So let's say if you talk about this distribution, so you have the baseline which is based on the previous year actual or budgets, then you transform to the requested. Now here you can specify whether you want to multiply by 5% or something. You can add those things here, right? So that's your distribution which is available here. So first is you get this data from base, and then you transfer to distribute to the department. Then you aggregate this, right? So you have the aggregation. So once your departments have created, then you get that approved budget from the aggregation. And once aggregation is done, you might want to transform this to your 12 months period, and you just define that. And how system will understand that 12 months you need to define on what percentage, then you have this period key here defined, where you can specify for all your period what percentage of the contribution from the final approved budget you want to allocate there. So that's what is your allocation schedule looks like. And then you have the stage allocation. So once you have the allocation defined, distribute, aggregate, and the final distribution, and then you have the stages and everything. So now you define that, okay, how it is going to be allocated to your different schedule here. So you have this initial stage, which is like baseline and requested distribution, and then aggregated and final aggregated, which you have it here, right? So all these things you define it here. Now there is some priority which you can define it here, but more than the priority, now important thing is now you have created your different stages, the scenarios, you have allocated, you have defined that how it should be routed for approval and things. So now you need to define the columns here. Now columns are basically, you can say, how you want to look at your budget plan. So now when I'm looking at my budget plan, let's say for a department itself, or for a year, if I'm looking at that plan which has been generated, how I want to see this? Do I want to see like previous year budgeted or actuals, let's say one column? Then I want to see that how it has got distributed to, let's say, the quarter 1, 2, and 3, and then I want to see the total, right? So how I want to see that plan once it is generated from these configuration is the columns which you need to define. So you need to define all your columns here. Now, if you look at that, any column which you would like to see there, you need to define. So let's say this is my actuals. I want to see the actual column. So then I define my actual. And then you also associate this a column with your the budget plan which you have, scenario which you have created. Now, if I want to have a quarterly for a department, like approved budget for a quarter by the department, right? I can select here, and I can select a period for which I want to see this. So it is for quarter 1, right? And then quarter 2 I can define. So I can define all my columns which I would like to see in my budget plan when I am creating. So those are the, and these budget plan, these columns generally as a thumb rule, you will create for each and every budget plan scenario. Right now here you see that I have let's say the demo data has a 4 columns for each quarter. Not necessary. If you are doing for a year, you will have 1 column. That's it, finished. Right? You don't need to have the 4 columns, but you need to make sure that all the budget plan scenarios which you have created, at least you have those number of columns defined here. Now, if you want to further have quarterly, half yearly, or subdivided into different columns, you can divide that. But at least bare minimum, you need to make sure that your all budget planning scenarios are added here. Right? So now I have a configuration. I know what columns I need, but what is my layout looks like, how when I look at my budget plan is defined here. Okay. So now I can look at my the layout. So layout is, let's say if I'm doing my planning for 3 years, or the department planning I'm doing, or CFO request. So what are the different columns I want to see together? Now those are the columns which I defined. But how do I want to, can I see all my columns together? No, that's what no, I want to not I want to do. What I want that whenever I'm doing a specific type of planning, I want to see the specific columns there. So if I'm doing that department planning, I just want to see that what was, let's say, requested, and then I want to see the quarter 1, 2, 3, and then I want to see the final approved, right? So what columns, what number of columns I want to see in a given scenario or given layout is defined here. Now this can be a permutation combination for you. So you are doing 3 years planning. So you can have previous year's actual, and this is this year baseline, right? You want to see the budget, the approved budget planning. So previous year quarter one, requested, approved. So all these things. So this is basically your quarter 1 and 2 planning which you are doing. So it depends how you want to see your budget plans when it is generated based on the number of columns you define. And those number of columns, remember, are defined based on the scenarios which you have created in your configuration. Right? So you need to define this layout. Now, once your layout is completed, this is not where you have completed all your configuration. Now, if I go back to the slide which we were talking about, if we just look at the different configurations which we have it, just go back. So we have completed this one. The next thing is my budget planning process, which I need to have it. Okay. So for the budget planning process, this is my prerequisites. I need to have this. I need to map all these things to my budget planning process. So now I go again budgeting and budget planning, and then I have the budget planning process here. Now I can have multiple budget planning process. Like if you know that I can do the total level of budget planning. I can do the, let's say, department level, or I can do the 2 years planning, 3 years planning. I can do different things, right? So this is where you can create your different plans which you have, different plans for your organization. So you click on the new, you just define the things which you can just define. Let's say we understand, let's take this one, the current year OPEX budget. If we take this as an example, okay. So I'm defining for this particular budget cycle, this USMF is my ledger, which is my ledger, which in the journal ledger, which I have it. Which accounting structure I want to use, like if I have multiple accounting structures. So generally you do the P&L budgeting, right? Revenue and expense budgeting. Then I select my org hierarchy. Remember, we talked about that. And based on that, it has my responsibility centers, which is my department. Let's say, so these are the different departments I have added in my hierarchy. So these are coming here. And then based on this, I have my budget planning workflows, which are appearing here, which I have defined here. So if you remember, we use these two budgets, right? OPEX department and this one. So here, this is like OPEX top bottom for the this department, but for this department, I want the auto approval and all these things. I can just define it here. Then I have the layout mapping. So I have my workflow mapped here. Then I have the each stage, what layout is applicable. So I'm doing this as a, let's say, department request basis. So I have the layout defined here. So all these things you need to map it here for your generating your budget plans. So remember, budget plan is your final thing which you are going to convert in your budget. And budget plan is just to get the numbers for defining your final budget. And those numbers are coming from what? Different scenarios like previous year, this year, department has requested something or modified or approved something. So you need to map all those things together in this budget planning process. Okay. Now, I think that's pretty much, I think we do not have a lot of time. As I said, like it's a very wide topic, like to cover in an hour, but I'll try to run one budget plan for you and see that how it looks and then what you can do after that, right? So once you have configuration, the process defined, the next thing is that you need to generate your uh, budget plan. Now to generate your budget plan, you can go to the periodic, and also you can use your workspace, which is your budget plans workspace is available here. But as I said, your budget plans can be generated from different things. So you can generate from the ledger. So you can generate from the ledger, which means the actual numbers which are posted. You can even have your sub ledger data to be used for your generating your budget plans. So all these things you can use it. But for example, we just want to, let's say, use the journal ledger thing. We want to use the journal ledger budget which is being posted, and we want to use that. So I can just have multiple things here. I can create a new budget plan, or I can replace the existing budget plan scenario, or I can update the existing budget plan scenario, right? How I want to aggregate, I want to aggregate by year, period, or the day, that I can define it. Then I have the for which fiscal year I'm doing this configuration, from which period to which period I'm doing this configuration, or I'm running this. What are the different account types I want to utilize from here? I can add this. Do I want to consider the historical, right? The target, and what is my planning process? So we just now created the planning process. So maybe I can select, let's say, the current year OPEX budget, and then I can give the name here something, and then I can select the budget plan scenario. So let's say I want to do this department request one, and for the expense I want to do it. And then I can select which are the responsibility centers. So sales and marketing, let's say I want to do it here, right? So this has been selected here. Now, if I want to add some factor on top of it, so I can just add it. If I do the one, which means like I'm considering the same numbers. But if I want to, let's say, whatever the input coming, I want to multiply or 25% or 50% or increase by 100%, I can add that factor here and then run my budget plan here. So I can click on generate. It is going to run the process, and then once that is completed, it is going to show us the message. So it had generated the budget plans, which is 61. So now how can I see that budget plan? I can just go here and look at this budget plans here. So if you see, this is my budget plan, which is being added here. I can go inside this and I can look at the values. So if you see, it has a baseline, then it has considered the columns of each quarter, and then the total which is being considered here. So all these things are coming now. I think it will help you to relate that the different columns which we created, then we have mapped it to the layout, and then we mapped it to the planning process which we had it, right? So this is where you can just look at these numbers which are populated here for that. Now here one more thing which we have it now, if it is now the workflow which was associated for this was the auto approved, but if it was not auto approved, it would have gone into the review process. So I will show you, like, I think, yeah. So if we take this one example, this demo one, I think there is nothing, but now if we would use this stage allocation or the distribution one, then it will go in a approval process. So it will go for approval, and then whosoever is assigned in our workflow to approve that, it will get approved here. Now, once you have I will just open this if something has a more data. Yeah, so it has the data, let's say. So now once we have enough information and all these things, you even have a concept called the worksheet. So if you are, let's say, at a stage where the departments are reviewing this and they can edit it. If you remember in our three departments, which we taken as an example, you can even you open this into a worksheet in the Excel, modify the data, and then submit it, and then you approve it, right? When it is in review and it has come for your approval process. So that's your worksheet option, which is available here and which you can approve. Once you are fine with your everything, you're working and you can look at the data which has been populated by these different budget planning processes, scenario stages which you have considered, then the final stage is that you just need to add them to a budget register entry. And then once it is added to your budget register entry, you can just use that for your final posting for your budget. So you can select for which year you want to utilize this. So let's say I would select this, and this is my original budget or something. So I will just migrate this, and what it is going to do, that it is going to create the budget register entries for me. And this budget register entry, I can just, if it is being created here, I can just use for my budget control purpose for that particular period, which I have it here, right? So that is how your end-to-end process looks like. I know we have not covered in the more towards the how you generate and how you do that, and that's because of the time constraint. But hope the base configuration, which is the most critical part, helps you to understand those different key components which we had there, right? So that's it for this session. I think we are on time, but I'm happy to take few questions if anyone has here.
Saurabh, I have one question.
Yeah.
So, will this budget plan, is it possible to generate based on budget group? And if it is, then how it will generate in budget register entry? And will the check work on budget group?
What do you mean by budget group?
For example, I have a group of GLs that for that I'll create as a budget group under budget control configuration.
See, your budget control is the on after the next further step, right? It's not the previous step, right? But yeah, I mean, if you looked at that budget planning, generating the budget, right, from the journal ledger or something, you have an option of selecting the type of budget. But I think you can also filter here the main account category or the different GLs which you want to consider here. So if you just want to have, let's say, sales accounts or I mean the salary account, if you have multiple expense account, you can just select them and then do your budget planning only for that.
Okay, so while generating the budget register entry from budget plan, how it will generate? Like
It
it will
will
go as a GL or individual?
it will be same, right? For it will be for a combination of that GL plus the dimensions which you have used.
I mean, it will get like a split of GLs only, right?
Yeah, it will be a split of GL plus, let's say you have the salary GL1, but department IT, then it will have one budget, but a same GL code, but the finance department and then the budget, the number which you have it. So like this.
Mm. Okay. Thank you, Saurabh.
No worries. Any other question, anyone? No questions. Cool. Okay, listen, thank you for your time and really appreciate your time on Friday and have a great weekend. We can wrap up the session then.
Yeah. So one small announcement. Let me share my screen. So we have our next session coming up on Fabric Power Data Insights, and the speaker is Pragati Jain. We are doing it on 12th July, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. GMT plus 4. So we have the scanning to register. You can scan and register, and I'll be circulating the same in my LinkedIn pages for D365 UGME. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time for taking us over the Friday evenings and joining us. Thanks, Saurabh. Thank you so much for an insightful session on the budget planning. I hope everyone thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Venkat. Okay, enjoy. Bye.